am super excited to be here. This is, I think, the 5th year that I've been able to come and be part of the summit. I love coming here. I love getting to work with Mark and the team that puts this together, to be able to work with Diane. And as a colleague, I love coming and being here with you. And I've made some wonderful relationships over here. I feel this affinity with this group. Like, number one, you were all scholars, had high GPAs. And I had a high GPA. You were all college athletes, played football. I played college football. Now, albeit, and this is shocking, I know, because I have like a 2-inch vertical leap. My kids tease me about this. Like, if you throw me car keys, I'm gonna drop this. But I did play college football, albeit it was one game. It was the exhibition powder puff game, part of homecoming week. It involved, did I hear anyone laughing already at this? This was like the peak. This was the peak of my athletic experience. My roommate was like a farm girl from Idaho, and she really wanted to play quarterback. She drags me there. One of the guys in my econ class, was an injured player who played quarterback, and he's like, Liz, come down and do this thing. So I go down there. In the game, there was this moment where like the opposing team throws a pass, and I just happen to be in the way of it. And I catch this ball, and I gloriously like run a yard and to like run right into the opposing player, and was, I guess, flagged, tackled. But what I remember most about this, and that was the end of my college football career, but it was a highlight for me, and it was also this learning moment, because I remember the players, the injured players coached the team, which is one of the reasons why the gals came out for this exhibition game. And I remember Corey Rasmussen coming up to me and just like had these eyes. He's like, Liz, did you do that? I'm like, yeah, I did catch this ball, which told me to steer my efforts towards academics. But anyway, I do love the game. I love being here with you. I feel like I get so much more than I give by coming down. And I love being here and it really is an honor to be part of the team that honors Bill Campbell and the contribution he made, not just to football, but to business, to leadership, to coaching. I was one of the fortunate people who got to be supported by him and receive his coaching, and he invested in me and my work, and it is just absolutely an honor to be here. Now, it comes with some pressure, because I've been here for 5 years, and I know there's some of you who are like, we've heard from Liz Wiseman before. We actually got this. We're good. We're good. Now, I know some of you are new, but some of you are returners, and it's always pressure, like, what do we do this year that's new? Well, fortunately, the world has changed a lot in the last 5 years, and the world has changed a lot in the last year, and we are facing new problems. Here's what we're going to do today. We're going to do a little bit of refresh on some of the ideas, and this group more than anyone knows the value of returning back to the basics and practicing and blocking and tackle the basics of what good leadership looks like. And then we're going to go into some new terrain, and we're going to explore some new ideas. We're going to do some new exercises, so I hope there is a little something for everyone. Our focus is going to be on leadership, and how do you be a great leader, but not just a great leader, but a leader who brings out greatness in other people. And we are going to talk about how do you lead in times of uncertainty, when you're surrounded by ambiguity, when there are more questions than answers, where things feel unstable and chaining. We're going to address burnout. And how do you work with remote teams? And we're going to talk about how do you lead when you can't really see. Now, I want to start our conversation. It's going to be a conversation. I am not going to do all the talking. Hopefully, I'm not doing most of the talking in our time here together. We're going to start with a little, like a walk through the history of leadership. So I want to go and do kind of like a survey of the history of leadership thought. Now, this is not going to be a long treatise on the history of leadership. We are not starting with like Attila the Hun. We're not going to look at the history of wars. We're going to do modern leadership, and I have conveniently defined modern leadership as when I began leading. Like, so it's a little selfish, a little myopic, but if you wouldn't mind, I want to start to like when I was a new manager, a new leader. I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing. Now, is there anyone here who is like a recently appointed manager, like you are now in your first like formal management job? A few people? Okay, so you know what I'm feeling like. What is that experience like when you're managing people for the first time? And I want you to just shout it out. What is that experience like? Pressure. Yeah, you feel like a therapist, or you need a therapist? Which one? Yeah, you feel like one. You feel out of control. What else? What is that feeling like when you are just new to managing? Yeah, adult daycare babysitter. Yeah, for me, it was just confusion. Like I was really good at a contributor, but I'm trying to figure out this. So let me set the stage of when this is. I went to college in the mid 80s, grad school in the late 80s. I went to BYU, go Cougars. So if you could do the math on this, the quarterback at the time when I'm in college, again, my big career as like a one-game powder puff player. So my quarterback was, roll back a little bit from Detmer. Go forward from McMahon. Okay, it's killing me that you don't know this. Okay, who was between Detmer and McMahon? Steve Young. Yeah, so Steve Young is our quarterback. Steve Young is like my quarterback. I leave college. I come back to my home state, the great state of California, back to this area just right here in the shadows of Stanford. And who's now the quarterback of my home team here? Steve Young. Yes, like Steve Young is kind of my quarterback. So that's a scene. I joined the workforce kind of in the 88. Fast forward a couple years, I've been thrown into management. I'm in charge of training for this rapidly growing software company called Oracle. And it's now early 90s. And I'm trying to figure out what's going on. I am in charge of training for the company. I'm a relatively new leader. Like all the other managers around me, we don't know what we're doing. Because they've just hired a bunch of smart engineers and technologists. They've been thrown into management positions. They're kind of wreaking havoc. So I organize a management training class. And I bring in an outside speaker. And he's going to run this class for a bunch of the managers. Now, his name is Stan. Stan was a big guy. Probably could have played like middle linebacker. Like, you know, he's a big guy. And he's teaching this class. He's talking about what great leaders do. And he said, you know, great leaders have a vision. How often have you heard that? All the time. They have this vision. And he described what a great leader's job is to have a vision of a better place. And then to extend the hand of greatness to their teams, and then to take them to that better place. And I'm already starting to wonder about this. And then for a fact, now again, Stan's big, like 6'4", 200 plus, like he's a big guy. We are on the 11th floor of the 500 Oracle Parkway building, which I wouldn't expect anyone to know what that implies, but that is where Larry Ellison's office is, the very mercurial founder, CEO of Oracle, who kind of notoriously thinks leadership and leadership development is a bunch of nonsense. So I'm organizing this kind of going rogue, organizing this leadership training class. And so Stan, and this is really the model of leadership that we're going to talk about, this kind of visionary, big idea kind of leader. Stan, for effect, what he does is he jumps up like this, not on a chair, on a table, on the big conference table in the 500 Oracle Parkway. And he's on this table, and now he has all of our attention. And I'm like, what is he doing up there? Like, I hired this guy. And he reaches like this, and he reaches his hand out, and he says, your job as a leader is to extend the hand of greatness to your team and to say, take my hand. I see a better place. Take my hand, and I will take you there. Now, this made a pretty big impression on me, mostly because he was standing on the table, and Larry Ellison's office is about 20 yards from where we are. And so what do you imagine, what is I thinking as he's doing this? Like, I will never forget this moment. What do you think is going through my mind? Now, okay, I'm going to invite everyone to contribute, but what I need you to do is like no mumbling allowed in this. What I need you to do is practice the ancient art of shouting at each other and at me, because I need to hear what you're saying. So what do you think is going through my mind? Did I get a liability waiver? Some of you, Mark might have been thinking that right now. You know, I know how close Stanford Hospital is to us. I'm thinking, first of all, okay, this is probably how I'm going to get fired. You know, Larry is going to walk by and go, who is this guy on the table and what are these people doing in there? So that's my first thought. But my second thought is that really what I'm supposed to do as a leader? Like to kind of stand above the people who work for me and to reach down like to their level and to invite them up to my level? Like, I'm thinking, this can't be right. Like, I knew in the moment it didn't feel right. And it wasn't because I was going to get in trouble for someone up on the table. It just didn't sound right. Because what's the assumption? I have a few little GIFs to share today. Let me see, what do we got here today? Like, what's the assumption behind this model of leadership? Like, take the hand of greatness. I see a better place, and I will take you there. Come follow me. Okay, good. Okay, now we're going here, but I need you to like be, that was still a little mumbling, but it was sort of collective mumbling. What's the assumption behind this? What's the thinking? It's a belief that you're the only one that could get there. What else is the belief behind it? There's about a dozen. I'm better than you. What else? I don't trust you. Like, you couldn't get there on your own. It's kind of like Big Snoopy, Little Woodstock. Y'all remember that cartoon? Kind of like big Snoopy in front and all the little birds behind. What else is the assumption behind this model? You're beneath me, that they want to follow you, that they're inferior. Okay, now I want you to go even like deeper into this. What's the assumption you have? Like, if you're going to take someone to a better place, and it is something that leaders do. They have to lead people to maybe sometimes safer places, maybe more strategically advantaged places in the market.
Lack of trust.
Yeah, I don't trust you to see it, to get there. That we're in a bad place to begin with. That I know better. Like, and there's kind of an assumption of, I've been there before. I've seen the better place. You haven't, and I'm going to take you there. Well, what kind of environment is that model of leadership good for? Leading from the front, no innovation. Like, if you are operating under extend the hand of greatness model of leadership, kind of big brain, great leader, what conditions is that way of leading good for? There are a few. With your children? Yeah, for like kind of a 2-year span in their lives before they figure out that you're not really the boss. Like, for those of you who have children, do you remember the day your kids are like, whoa, I don't have to do what you say. You're actually not the boss of me. And then the job gets a little harder, doesn't it? Right? And you're leading through influence. What other conditions? Where innovation's not required, where there's not a lot of change. Maybe an urgent issue where you need one brain to make a call. Yeah. So this was the model of leadership when I began working as a leadership, but then the world started to get more complex, more uncertain. Innovation became more apparent, and we started to move to a different model of leadership. It's sort of a many-brain model of leadership. It's the realization that there are very few leaders who are smart enough, who have big enough vision that they can find all the answers and tell people what to do. And I started to notice this in my experience at Oracle, that there are a lot of really smart leaders who had great ideas and great answers and who were good at what they did, but no one around them had good ideas and answers because no one needed to, or no one was allowed to. I noticed that there are a lot of really smart leaders who were having a diminishing effect on people around them. But I also noticed other leaders who were equally smart, equally talented, equally capable, who had a very different effect on people around them. They weren't the only ones with big ideas. They had great ideas and insights, but people around them had good ideas and insights. Like when these leaders walk in a room, the dynamic changes. When I exited Oracle 17 years later, I exited with this big question of why is it? We're going to start with this idea. We're going to look at this kind of era of leadership, which I wouldn't say is over, but we're going to add a few new twists to it. Does anyone else have a watch that does that all the time to them at inconvenient moments? I'll have to figure out how to turn that off. So what I want to do is I want to explore this idea of leader as multiplier to their team and leader as diminisher to their team. Some of you are familiar with this. I'm going to ask you to kind of do some advanced thinking on this as we go along. But let me just kind of level the playing field here and just this baseline concept.
What is the fate of the smart and the talented? The corporate world finds smart, talented people and promotes them into management. But many of these leaders never look beyond their own capability to see the full genius on their team. Have you ever worked around someone who made you feel smarter and more capable? We call these leaders multipliers. Have you ever worked around someone who made you question your own intelligence? We call these leaders diminishers. They may hire smart people, but they quickly put other people in the background. They are smart leaders, but they shut down the smarts of others. Diminishers come at such a high cost. They waste talent and intellect that sits right in front of them. Organizations can't afford diminishers. Multipliers come from all walks of life, from corporate boardrooms to our school's classrooms. They are leaders like Lutz Ziob, Bill Campbell, Wangari Maathai, and many more. These people are real, and the way they lead can be learned and it can be developed. What would happen in your organization if you operated more like a multiplier? Imagine what is possible with access to all the intelligence that sits in your organization.
Okay, that is the simple idea we're going to explore as we've moved from this model of leadership, which is sort of a one-brain model of leadership, to a model where the leader needs to be a multiplier to the people around them. As you watch this little video, who had names of people come to mind? Yeah, like most people can. Who came to your mind first? The multiplier in your career or your coach, or the diminisher? Yeah, for most people, it's the diminisher. Like sometimes at the mere mention of the word diminishing leader, they're like, oh, I've experienced that. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to think back on your career. This could be your work career, it could be your football career, it could be maybe coaching work you've done, and I want you to identify two leaders, one of whom was a diminisher to you. Like they're smart, they're surrounded by smart, capable people, but yet hard problems aren't getting solved. Like you're working hard, but you're not making progress. Or maybe it's someone that you're simply holding back around, like maybe offering just the safest of ideas. Has everyone got a name of someone? Now, if you've got a bunch of people who have come to mind, I want you to just pick one of those. Okay, has everyone got a name in your head? Okay, now I want you to think back on, and again, this could be a coach, it could be a music teacher, it could be, for some people, like, can it be a roommate? Yes, okay. I also want you to do the very same thing with a multiplier. Someone, so maybe the best way to find this person is to go to this point in your career, be it a work career, an athletic career, when you were at your best, doing your best work, performing at your peak. And I want you to like grab the leader, the coach, the person that you were working under, contributing under. Has everyone got one? Here's what I want you to do. I want you to, great, Mark's already got there. There's some yellow boxes here. Box number one, would you write down what your diminisher did. Describe how they led or managed. And if you could, I want you to keep it behavioral. So don't describe their personality, describe what they did, the actions, behaviors. Okay, now in that second box, I want you to write a number down between 0 and 100. And the question is, how much of your intelligence did he or she get from you? Now, it's a little bit of a tricky question, so let me explain it before you write that number down. By intelligence, I mean your knowledge, your skill, your talent, your insights, your capability. So if there's like a tree with 100 apples, and that represents all of your capabilities and insights, how many did they harvest versus sort of leave there untouched? It's also a tricky question because I'm not asking you how hard you were working. My guess is everyone here has had an experience where you were working really hard but strangely underutilized. I want to know how much of your brain power and talent and insights they were getting access to based on the way they led, not what you were trying to contribute, what they got from you. That's the first one. The second is same for what did your multiplier do? Describe their behavior, put a number down. If you have been here before when we've done a session on multipliers, and maybe just like by show of hands, who's been here through one of our multiplier workshops? Okay, a few people. If you have been here before, I want you to answer just a little bit of a different question. Instead of these two leaders, and you can start with that, I want you to identify a time when you were perhaps a diminisher to someone on your team. What were you doing? And how much of their capability do you think you got from them? And then maybe identify a time when you felt like you were leading very much like a multiplier. Like, no, I think someone would pick me as their multiplier. What were you doing that brought out their best? And how much of their capability do you believe you got? Okay, that's level 201 on this. Okay, why don't you take a minute, get those thoughts written down, and then we're going to talk about it. Okay, here's what I would invite you to do. Would you gather into a group of about 5 or 6 people? So like maybe these 5 right here. And I want you to go around that group and just start with your diminisher. You're going to have about 3 minutes on this. And would you just describe the diminisher's behavior? Now, if you are a returner, you're describing what maybe you were doing when you could see you were having a diminishing effect on someone. And let me just establish the fact that there probably isn't anyone here in this room who hasn't had some diminishing moments. I've had many of these. So you describe the behavior. I want you to be listening for what is common across this. What is it that leaders do that tend to underutilize other people and shut down good ideas and thinking and actually cause people to hold back and not be able to give their all, particularly when they're trying to? And then would you share that number and calculate an average? You're going to have about 3 or 4 minutes on that, and then we're going to do 3 or 4 minutes focused on your multiplier. Again, what we're looking for is what is the difference in how people lead that either puts them in this sort of one brain model of leadership, great leader, hand of greatness, versus everyone being able to work at their best. Okay, go. And feel free to like stand up and use the space here. Okay, so what did you notice? What did you notice as you got a chance to reflect back on working under the leadership of a diminishing leader? And you thought about your own experience, heard other people? And my hope is you kept that all kind of clinical, or did like diminisher stories sort of emerge in this? What did you notice that diminishing leaders tend to do? Like what's in their playbook? They tell too much. Yeah, I've done that a bunch of times. As a parent, for sure. They micromanage. It was the number one word that came up in the research is micromanage. Oh, I've done that a few times. They take control. They're operating from a control point of view. They gossip. They embarrass. They operate with embarrassment. Yeah, calling people out, which in the end kind of ended with embarrassing them. Like when leaders do that, I'm like, oh God, I'm really embarrassed for you on this. What else did you notice? What was common? What was the theme in that?
Condescending.
It's condescending. And you know what else is condescending? Take the hand of greatness. I see a better place and I will take you there. That's fundamentally the model, is to condescend and say, like, you can ascend with me, but I'm sort of at a higher level, which was the dominant mindset for leadership just not too long ago. What else did you notice? Inaccessible. You know, when I started this research, I thought these diminishing leaders were micromanaging, controlling, bossy, bully, embarrassing kinds of leaders. But what I found is that often we can end up diminishing by just being inaccessible or not being decisive enough, not available. In fact, this one comes with a bit of an ouch for me because, like, I hate micromanaging. I hate being micromanaged. Someone tries to micromanage me, I get a little bit vicious, honestly. And like my claws come out and I get really like, whoa, you're the same way? Oh, I hate it. And I hate when other people do it. Like, you should see me in retail establishments where like supervisors are, ooh, it gets me going. So I mean, one day I was like all frothy about this and I was in my staff meeting and someone was micromanaging someone else and I'm like, give me some feedback. Like, do I ever micromanage anyone? And like there was this in unison laughter on my team and they're like, no, you're not a micromanager, Liz. No, you never micromanage. And I'm like, whew, I'm on the good side of this, right? But then there was this awkward pause. Anyone want to guess what they said? Like, kind of in unison. It wasn't actually that kind of exception. They're like, no, you don't micromanage, but Liz, like, you kind of like leave. And they didn't mean leave the office. They're like, you give us work, you trust us, you're not in our face, but like, we wouldn't mind if you came back and visited us every now and then while we're doing the work. Like, they're like, you give us something to do and then you move on to the next thing. And I'm like, well, that was kind of the sign that I trust you. But what was the need that I was missing? Yeah, guidance, coaching, feedback, collaboration, appreciation, validation. Like, it was kind of like, okay, I'm on to more important things now. I just gave you something less. And it was important feedback that you can end up having a diminishing effect by being inaccessible rather than micromanaging. Anything else you heard that people tend to do? And actually, let me ask the returners, and by that I mean people who have been through multipliers with me or read the book. What do you notice that you tend to do that has a diminishing effect?
Hero complex, save the day.
Oh yeah. Does anyone else like fall victim to that? Because it feels so good, doesn't it? And because people seem to appreciate it at first, right? But then what happens? What else? For those of you who have had some time, maybe years, to think about, gee, am I having a diminishing effect? What is it that you find yourself doing? Not trusting the team.
Talking too much.
Talking too much. I've never done that. What else? What else that you've noticed that you do? Was that tonality? Now, you've got to say it nice and loud for me, because if I can't hear what you're saying, I'm just going to pretend you said what I wanted you to say. And I'm just going to start making stuff up, which isn't good for anyone here.
Show emotion.
Yeah, maybe being too emotional? Too emotional. Oh, always on, like maybe bringing too much energy into it. We're going to get into that in just a little bit. Okay, how much of your capability did the diminishing leader get? I just need a few data points. I'm assuming, did your team calculate an average? Why don't we take 10 of these? I need someone here, so we're going to rattle off 10 of these. I need someone in the room who will calculate an average of these averages. No weighted average, just like don't show off your stats here, just straight up average. Anyone willing to do that? You right here? And your name is? John. Okay, we're going to give John 10 data points. No, oh, this is a no calculator. We're like John the math savant. We are in a group of scholar athletes. John, you can use a calculator. Okay, you guys put a lot of pressure. Well, I said, coming back here is a lot of pressure. Hanging out with high achievers. Okay, first data point? 40. 50, 41, 55, 35, 50, 45, 35, 37, and one more? 60. Okay, now we can take more, but like 10 makes it a little easier for him to do the math. While John is doing the math on that, what was the assumption? What's the assumption that goes into, that sits behind that behavior? So what I mean by that is like the mindset. What's the belief that generates that diminishing behavior? So I want you to get inside the head of that diminishing leader. Like maybe go back to that person and their name. What was the assumption they were operating under? It was a belief that, and I want you to give it to me in the form of an assumption, like the things we tell ourselves. They believed that I know it all. The team will be better with me.
Fear of losing control.
Oh, okay, give it to me in the form of an assumption. I believe that.
They were fearful of losing control.
They believed that. Okay, they believe that, like, because that's not what we tell ourselves. Like, I'm operating from that position, but what's the thing I'm saying to myself? I believe that if I lose control, if I don't have control, something bad's going to happen. Yeah.
Or if it's to be, it's up to me.
Yeah, if it's to be, it's up to me. Like, so much of this we have been taught to do. And so many of these assumptions are what generate high performance as contributors, does it not? Hey, like, you know what? If not me, then who? And if it's up, it's to me, it's up to me. And it could end up having a diminishing effect. For those of you who have spent time thinking about how you might have a diminishing effect, what tends to be the mindset, the belief you get yourself in that moment?
Scarcity.
It's a scarcity. Give it to me in the form of a belief. I believe that. I'm telling myself that I'm the expert. It won't get done without me. Okay, give it to me in the form of a belief. And the reason why I want this in the form of a belief is so that when we recognize when these mantras, sayings, associations go through our head.
I think some of it also comes from I have to prove myself.
Yeah.
I might be lacking, so I want to overcome it.
That I have to prove myself. Like for those of you who are kind of new to manager, what does it feel like when you are sort of put a little bit on a pedestal? Like you've been elevated, maybe you've been in a peer group and now suddenly you're the boss. Or for those of you who are like new to parenting and you're like, what is this world? Like where I'm now in charge, like I'm not even sure I'm an adult yet. Now I'm somehow in charge of another life. Like you feel like all eyes are looking at you and you start to tell yourself, I gotta have answers. I need to tell people what to do. They're not going to know what to do. Or if I don't have answers, people are going to wonder, well, then why are you the boss? And we can so easily get ourselves into this mentality. John, what do you got for us? 43.4. Ooh, look at that, 0.4. Nicely done. Okay, 43. Okay, so that's, 43.4. Okay, I have a big fail on the marker. So you can't see that. I can see it. It'll remind me. 43, if there's a marker somewhere in this room, maybe in the back of the tech team, they could throw it. But I guess we don't really keep these around anymore. Okay, 43.4. It's amazing. You have people write something down. They're like, with what? My finger? My stylus? Like, I want you to go back to this moment that you were thinking about, whether it was on the field, whether it was at work. How much of your intelligence and know-how and capability were you wanting to give? And this is not a trick question. I really want you to tell me, like, what were you trying to give? What did you want to give? All of it, 100%. Okay, that's what I find people say most of the time, but was there anyone who's like 0, actually? So if your number came to 0, like that's not unusual too, because it tends to start at 100%, but then what happens? Why try? Like, why say something because she never does anything with this, and it's like a learned underutilization. And what happens, what gets built in this gap? And I find that, and this is true all around the world. This is true of high-achieving scholar athletes. It is true of people who work in tech or down at the hospital or in academia. People come to work, I don't think this is being dramatic by saying desperately trying to contribute everything they have. It's what I hear people say over and over. You can imagine, I am a magnet for diminisher stories. I've heard thousands and thousands of people tell me what it was like trying to contribute 100% working under a certain leader or coach. So what happens in this gap, oh, Diane, thank you, between 43%, which is what people are actually able to give, versus like the aspiration of 100, what gets built in that gap? What happens in that gap? Self-preservation happens in that gap. Absolutely. What else happens there? Animosity, resentment. And not only do you, of course you resent your boss. And like that becomes a subject of all your family dinners and get-togethers with your friends. You know people who have diminishing bosses because I'm like, I know what we're talking about at lunch. We're talking about their evil boss. And we've been talking about this for 4 years. Of course there's animosity there, but what else do you build animosity toward? Well, I heard some interesting things, but they were in the mumble category. The work itself. You start to resent your job. You tend to start to resent the organization. I heard someone say yourself. You start to lose confidence, and you start to wonder, like, man, I feel like I used to be good at this. What happened? Absolutely. Okay, let's talk about your multiplier. What did your multiplier do? Or, let's start with those who are kind of new to this. When you think about those leaders, what did you hear across that? What did your leaders do? That brought out the very best in you. Trust. They empower, they trust, they believe in you, they listen. They gave feedback. They care about you as a person. They don't treat you as like a job description or a position. They see you as like a whole being. They embrace being challenged themselves, and they tend to challenge others. Yeah, they give you criticism. They're not afraid. They operate with radical candor. What else did you notice they tend to do? They set very high standards and then hold you accountable. Hold you accountable. Accountability is one of the interesting things. I remember coaching this one executive, and he's a really nice guy, ran a big tech operation worldwide, and I interviewed a bunch of people who worked for him, and one of the things they said is, man, we wished Pete held us accountable. I didn't see that coming. Like a lot of people might be, yeah, like a boss who lets me slide a little bit. It's like, yeah, that's good enough. Oh, yeah, I get it. It was hard. Let's back down that goal. See, what happens when you don't hold people accountable? What's the messaging that gets sent? Like there's tons of subtext that happens when you let people slide.
You don't care.
Your work's not important. The contribution you make, like we can get by without it. You're not important on the team. What are the messages that get sent when you hold people accountable to high standards? And I mean to reasonable standards. I'm not talking about perfectionism or, crazy goals. We can't do this without your work. What else? There's more to it.
You can't excel.
You can excel.
Your growth matters.
Your growth matters. Like we need you at this level, and we see you being able to go beyond this level.
Gives them a purpose.
Yeah, like your work is important here. You have a purpose, and we need you to play your position and more. That's a message that gets sent. What else? For those of you who are returners, I want you to go to what are things that you've caught yourself doing that you see have this multiplying effect? Removing obstacles for people. What else? Coaching. Give them confidence in themselves. Praise. Being vulnerable. Being available to people. And like for me, checking back. And like holding people. And that's part of, I think, what they were saying is like, yeah, you don't micromanage, but like you move on. Which is easy to not hold people accountable if I'm like on to the next thing. How much of your capability did the multiplier get? Like for good science here, let's go to the same 10 groups, if you would. If you did not get to this average, just pass and we'll gather 2 more points. So John, are you ready to do the honors on this again? Okay. How much did your multiplier get? 95? 90? 94, 100? 95? 100? 95? 90 and 90. Okay, John, we'll let you do that again. What's the assumption behind that way of leading? What's the belief? I trust you. When you have found, particularly those who are returners to this topic, when you have caught yourself in multiplier mode, what have you told yourself in those moments? In the moments preceding this. Not the moments after, which is like, hey, check me out, good leadership. But what were you telling yourself as that contribution was evolving? Now we're performing. That's interesting. What else? What were you telling yourself? I've got a capable team, which is maybe one of the most powerful things that we can tell ourselves over and over. I have to remind myself of this, like when I'm in like a frenzy and time is short and the stakes are high, like I find myself saying, oh, it's just easier to do it yourself. Oh, you know what, the best person to put on this job? Me. I have to remind myself, you know what, I actually have a capable team, and if I just slow down for a bit and let them jump in and contribute, I have a very different effect. And we get very different results. John, what did we find? 96%. 96%. Okay, well, there we go. 43 versus 96%. What does it tell us? Yeah, it's more than double. And I think when I did this research, I had recently come out of a role as an operating executive at Oracle. So my researcher hat, I noticed some things, but when I put on my executive, my operator hat, I'm like, wow, I've spent a lot of time groveling in my CFO's office for headcount and budget. But if I can be a better leader, it's like I get those resources for free. And it doesn't even really cost me that much, because one of the things that we find is that these 2 very different ways of working, sort of the diminisher way versus the multiplier way, create very different work experiences. Starting with the contributors, people describe this. How would you describe work in a word under diminishing leaders? Miserable, frustrating, unfulfilling, anxious. The word that came up more than any other in our research is exhausting. And I'm like, whoa, that's interesting that working under our capability level is exhausting. I would have thought it's the other way around. Like, wouldn't this be exhausting? Like, oh, I'm using every IQ point the good Lord gave me, and then begging for more as I'm trying to figure things out. Like, isn't this exhausting? Now, people describe this as exhausting. What did they describe this as? Fulfilling. Energizing, energy giving. We are dealing with epidemic levels of burnout right now. You might be experiencing burnout. People on your team might be experiencing burnout. Companies all around the world are trying to figure out how do we deal with this epidemic. And it is so easy to assume that people experience burnout because they have too much work, too many demands, that work is hard and heavy. But everything I found in my research points to something different, is that people don't burn out because they have too much work. People burn out because they have too little impact and because they're underutilized. Like, if you want to treat burnout on your teams, instead of like taking your foot off the accelerator, like maybe you put it on. Maybe you actually help people contribute at their fullest. Not necessarily by loading up more work. See, people don't necessarily experience that exhilaration because they have more work, more volume of work, but more challenging work that deeply challenges their intellect. Now, the other thing is it creates a very different work experience for the leader. I wrote up this little article, a guy named Dave Havlick. He's the CFO at, or maybe deputy CFO at Salesforce right now. He was the head of investor relations, had a really big job at Salesforce. He went through one of our multiplier training programs, and he tried to do a few things differently. And it had this amazing effect on his team. He told me, I used to stay up till 2 in the morning all the time, answering emails, solving problems, like all the requests of my team. Hey, Dave, what do we do about this? How should we handle this? And he said I was like exhausted. He tried to just make a little switch. Every time he got an email, he said, I'm just gonna ask people what they think we should do, rather than tell people what to do. He made that little shift. He described the effect on the team was absolutely liberating. They're like, oh, glad you asked. We actually have ideas. We can all, it's funny, it just happens right here. And they're like, we can figure a lot of this out. I write this little article up for HBR. We're getting ready to publish it. I run it by Dave, of course. And he said, Liz, like you missed something important. And I was like, oh, wow, what did I miss? And he said, you described how liberating it was for the people who work for me, but you didn't really describe how liberating it was for me. He's like, I don't feel exhausted anymore. Like I'm working less actually and enjoying work more because that contribution has been spread across the team. Like it treats burnout for people who are underutilized, and it also treats burnout for the people who are overtaxed, overutilized. Here's what we find that these diminishing leaders do differently. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. I just want to kind of recap a lot of what we've talked about. We find that diminishing versus multiplying leaders operate from very different assumptions. The diminisher tends to operate from the assumption that no one's going to figure it out except me, versus the multiplier who's operating from this assumption that, you know what, and we heard it over here, that my team is capable. They tend to do these 5 things very differently. The first is how they manage talent. Diminishers love to acquire talent, but they tend to underutilize people. They bring in stars, but then people are kind of languish. Whereas the multipliers are more like talent magnets. They're more than scouts. They become known as the managers everyone wants to work for. And they have this steady stream of talent that flows in. It's because how they use people, like seeing what are people fundamentally naturally good at. The second difference is the kind of culture or work climate they create. The diminisher tends to be a tyrant, not always hot-headed, yelling kind of tyrant, just someone who creates an environment of stress. People start to experience anxiety, our ability to think and solve hard problems shuts down. The multiplier tends to be a liberator, kind of like that experience with Dave Havlick. They give people space to do their best thinking and their best work. The third is how they set direction. Diminishers tend to tell people what to do. They tend to be know-it-alls, whereas the multipliers, they operate as challengers. They ask people to do hard things, and that's one of the exercises we're going to do today, is how do you construct a challenge that people can really sink their teeth into, that brings out the best thinking of a group. How they make decisions, the decision maker versus the debate maker. Taking a very different role. Instead of being the decider of the team, it's like deciding what issues need debate, and then assembling the right minds and leading a team in hard-hitting kind of debate. That doesn't tear down a team, it ends up building up a team. And then lastly, it's how they get things done, how they drive for results. And the diminisher tends to get it done because they're micromanaging, but it doesn't get done without them. In some ways, hovering over it. It's why they end up exhausting themselves as well as others. Versus the multiplier, who tends to be an investor, they give other people ownership. And I probably shared this, but I want to share it with the folks who knew. I think one of the best leadership practice on this comes from John Chambers, who was the former CEO of Cisco. when he took over as a new CEO, it's a young, rapidly growing company, he makes an important hire. He hires his first vice president into the company. So it's his first executive, and Doug is going to be responsible for customer service. And he says to Doug, when it comes to this part of the business, you get 51% of the vote and 100% of the accountability. Okay, what did he just say to Doug? I think this is so brilliant. I hope some of you are using this. What's the messaging when you tell someone they have 51% of the vote? You have control. You're in control, not me. What else are you saying? I trust you. Our team trusts you.
So collaborative.
But I still got 49, which is why it's so brilliant. It's not like what I was doing, which is, hey, it's yours, bye-bye. It's, you know what, we're in this together, but you are dominant in this. Like, you have final decision rights, but I'm 49, meaning consult me, keep me informed, take my opinions into consideration, counsel with your teammates and colleagues and peers, but you own this. Like, has anyone tried this exercise of giving someone 51% of the vote? Yes?
Sometimes it comes back.
And it rolls back to you.
And you have to try again. Yeah, 'cause I think people, my experience is people have lived under that old school of leadership so much that sometimes when you try to give them that 51, they're like, hold on a second. But I think they need to be encouraged to take it.
Yeah, and sometimes you have to say, I really mean this. I have this dear colleague, Ben Petterman. We worked together at Oracle for like 10 years, and we collaborated on a lot of things. And we would make this distinction, like who was 51, who was 49. So we knew who kind of had final decision. And I would say, like, okay, Ben, this is great. You're 51 on this. And he's like, got it, boss. And I'm like, no, you're 51% on this. And so I'm going to go ahead and take this off my to-do list. And I remember Ben would stop and he'd be like, hey, boss. I don't think he like saw me as a boss. It was like a term of endearment. He also called me Lizzie. I was the only person on the planet who does that. He'd be like, hey, boss, when you say you're taking that off your to-do list, are you saying that you want me to have that on my to-do list? I'm like, yeah, that's what I meant. Or like sometimes I'd say, hey, you know what, Ben, you're 51 on this. I'm not going to wake up tomorrow thinking about this. And he'd be, are you suggesting that I need to wake up tomorrow thinking about this? I'm like, that's exactly the implication. Like, I had to really emphasize, it's yours. And then what do you do when someone comes to you and is like, yeah, things aren't going so well, back to you? You've got to remember to hand the pen back. Does anyone remember we talked about this? Can anyone like tell some of our newer attendees like what it means to hand the pen back? You're going to break my heart if no one remembers this.
You step in and you provide some guidance, and then you give it back to them and say, like, what do you think?
Absolutely, and this came from a leader named Jay Choi. I hired him right here from Stanford University. He was this amazing leader. And he just said to me, he said, Liz, when people on your team are struggling, it's irresponsible not to help. But you've got to remember to hand the pen back. And I'm like, what does that mean? And he described this scenario. He's the managing director of McKinsey. Anyone from McKinsey here? He oversees McKinsey in Korea. And there's a project team that's been working on a transformation business study for McKinsey's largest Pan-Asian client, biggest client. They've been doing this study. It is the night before the presentation. Like, they've done the first phase of the work, and now they're going to present to the client. Of course, after phase one, what you're really hoping is you get a green light for phase two. The team is all assembled in this conference room, and they are stuck. Like, and I think everyone's probably been in that situation where you're like trying to put a pitch together, and they're just stuck. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, and they're stuck. Now, Jay is in the room because he's the executive sponsor to this project, but he's not the project leader. And the project leader is up at the board, and they're not making a lot of progress. They've got tons of data, but it's not really coming. And the project leader finally turns to Jay, who's been in the back listening and observing, and it's kind of like, hey, you got anything for us? Like, we're kind of stuck. And Jay does. And he's been in that project leader's shoes before. He can see, like, kind of the storyboard for this. So the project leader hands Jay the pen. Jay, takes the bait, so to speak, and he comes up and he starts mapping it out. And he's like, okay, here's sort of the data, and here's sort of a theme or a pattern in that, and here's sort of like the big issue. And he can see this so clearly. He starts mapping it out, but the multiplier orientation, he's very much a natural multiplier, it just signals restraint. And he stops sort of midway through his thinking. And of course, you can imagine how good it would feel for him to do the hero thing, right? Da-da-da, let me complete this. What would happen if he had completed this work? Who would have given the presentation to the client? Who would have given the next presentation to the client? Yeah, who would have been personally up till 2 in the morning putting the presentation together for the client? So Jay just kind of stops his thinking and he says, here's a few ideas to get you unstuck. Why don't you take it from there? Cap goes back on the pen. He hands a pen back to the project leader. Jay sits down, project leader resumes. So what does it mean to hand the pen back? It's like saying, you're still in charge. Yeah, and so give someone 51% of the vote, but then when it kind of rolls back to you, you don't need to say not mine, this is yours. It's recognize, okay, that person's stuck. How do I help get them unstuck? What's the smallest amount of intervention I can make so that that person can resume the lead on this? So you couple these two practices together and some pretty magical stuff happens. Give someone 51% of the vote, and then when that rolls back to you, help, but hand the pen back. What would you do, in sort of daily language? How would you say to someone, hey, I'm handing the pen back to you? What would you say to them? You got this with still a little fuzzy. I want you to make it just simple but concrete that they are in charge, not you. Because once you help, who owns it now? The helper ends up owning it. And particularly if you are more senior in the organization, the assumption is you're now in charge. How do you let someone know that you're not in charge, they're in charge? You've got the lead on this. Let me know if you need my help again. Or you can be really simple and just say, you know what, I'm happy to contribute, but I'm not the leader on this. I very much see you as the lead on this. You own it. Okay, and we find that these multiplier leaders get vastly different levels of capability for others. This is probably the simple part of the research. What happens if you find yourself over here on the diminisher side? How do you get yourself over to the right side of this chart, particularly for those of us who are ooh, I find myself doing some of those things. I find myself thinking some of that. My favorite part of the research and my favorite interview was sitting down with Bill Campbell, the VCs that he worked with. And I think you all know Bill was the coach that the big venture capital companies brought in when they had a young founder who needed to grow into a serious executive. The Kleiner folks said, you know what, that's when we put Bill on this. I went down to do a multipliers interview with Bill. Because they're this is how Bill leads. He's an absolute multiplier. So I go to do a multiplier interview with him, and I walk out of there having done a diminisher interview with them. And this is what later, when Bill invited me to come down and film him, this is kind of how he described his journey.
In my early days in management, I came from a background where, football, the more you knew, the better you were. And I think what you do in the situations that you're in when you're management, you want to show everybody that you know everything. And so what you do is you kind of dominate the conversations, you tell people what you think, and you're not listening. And sooner or later it comes upon you that, I'm really screwing this thing up. I'm not getting the best ideas from the best people. And I think over a long period of my early career, as I look back on it, I was one of the great diminishers of all time. When I was at Apple, I was a diminisher, and yet, Donna Dominski, Randy Commissar, they really wanted to come and start a brand new venture with me, and we had a lot of fun. We were always close and good friends. And, you know, they felt like at the end of my Apple time, I was getting somewhat better. And when I went to Claris and we started it, I went back to the same old way, you know, dominating conversations, telling people what to do, making a lot of the decisions in the staff meetings. And, you know, we had a brilliant management team, you know, people that, you know, you look at people that the caliber of Donald Dubinsky and Randy Commissar and the rest of them, you know, Yogan Dalal, Dan McCammon, a lot of people who were like that. And so Donna was sent to me as an emissary from the group and sat down with me one afternoon and said, "You're back to your old ways. You're not letting us do the jobs that we were hired to do. If we can't participate with you, then it's not going to be any fun being here. If you're going to make every decision and manage everything yourself, then this company's never going to be great and we're never going to enjoy it." Whew, what a blast. And it was one of those things that when you went home that night, you recognized, God, she did me a great favor, and I really had to go about making a behavior change.
Okay, that's Bill. Oh, we'll finish.
I don't like that at all. You know, but it didn't just happen overnight. You know, you needed to be constantly reminded that you have a tendency to try to provide your knowledge and your expertise in the situation and not listen to people who really had either different ideas or even way more capable than you are in certain functions.
Okay, I've got two questions. I have two questions on Bill's description of this, which is the first, what shifted in him? His awareness. And what shifted in the way that he led? He mentioned several of them. He started listening rather than telling. What else shifted? He started trusting people, and it wasn't like he mistrusted people. He just forgot for those like moments that, you know what, by the way, I work with amazingly talented people. See, he had learned the art of diminishing through some of his early career experiences. One of the things that I know shifted with him, you know, he ended up working as a beloved CEO at Intuit. And you've heard Brad talk about that. One of the things he said to me, he said, I work with these engineers, and I learned that you just never give engineers a solution. What do you give an engineer? A problem. He said it completely, I was like, hey, maybe we should do it this way. Why don't you guys go play with those ideas? And they're like, nah, it's bad. And then he decided, like, here's the problem we're trying to solve. And then they start to go. He said it really fundamentally shifted with him. He became not only this amazing multiplier leader, he became a multiplier of multipliers. What caused him to shift? What very specifically caused him to shift? Yeah, Donna kind of threw a brick at him. And she's like, hey, we're smart people. You hired us because we're smart, and we actually would like to be smart. You know, Bill had a Donna in his life. Not all of us have Donnas to tell us, like, hey, you're kind of screwing it up. Like, we like you. We'd love to work for you. We think you're amazing. But you're doing too much of the thinking yourself. Like, how do we get that kind of feedback? See, one of the things that we found in this research is that most of the diminishing that's happening is not coming from tyrannical, narcissistic, bully, call every play kinds of leaders. It's coming from what I call the accidental diminisher, which is having a diminishing effect with the best of intentions. Maybe even just playing so big that other people feel like they have to play small around us. Or maybe just playing so big that no one else has to play big. I remember I had a boss, and we would go meet with our clients, and I was pretty good at this, giving presentations to clients. He was just exceptionally good at it. So every time we would go to meet with clients, I started to defer to him. I'm like, Don, why don't you handle this? You take the lead on it. Well, guess what? He became amazing at it, and what do you think happened to me? I'm like getting smaller and smaller, saying less and less. And it wasn't like he said, Liz, I'll do the talking, you just smile. He never said that, never implied it, never shut me down. I just like atrophied because there was no need. Sometimes we're just playing so big, no one else has to show up. big. Now, I can't come here and not share this story. I know I've shared it here. This is one of my favorite leaders. Of course, a lot of people see him as a favorite athlete. Is there anyone who remembers, like, and of course you know who this is. This is Magic Johnson. But this is him in high school before he is Magic. He's, of course, Irvin. Yeah, Irvin Johnson Jr. He's a teenager. He said there was something that his coach said to him that really shaped him as a leader. So he's this young man, phenomenally talented athlete, growing up in the state of Michigan, playing for, I don't know if that's the Kings or the Vikings, and his coach says to him, Irvin, every time you get the ball, I want you to pass, right? What do you think his coach said to him? Who here also played basketball? Yeah, what do you think his high school coach said to him? Take the shot. Take the shot. And so he did, and he takes a lot of shots, and he makes a lot of points. And the coach loves it because he's not only a phenomenally talented athlete, he is coachable. The other players love it because they're winning. Yeah, they win every game. So they go, they're undefeated. Is there a high school kid who doesn't want to be on an undefeated team? No, it's like thrilling. And this is going on game after game after game. They're winning with like 54 points, and young Irvin would have scored, 48, 50, maybe high 30s when he's sick. I don't know. But they're winning every game. And it's going on. Everyone's happy about this. They play this one game. It's not like a championship or playoff. It's just a game. They win. Celebrations come to an end. And now the players are leaving the gymnasium with their parents. It's back in the late 70s. And this young man happens to notice the faces of the parents. What do you think he noticed? Okay, of course, what did those parents come to see? Their kid play. And what did they get? Like Laker Showtime Magic, like an early, rendition of Laker Showtime Magic, which I imagine was great for the first game or two, right? But he notices the faces of the parents. I don't know, what do you think he saw on it? Maybe just disappointment, maybe outright resentment, I don't know. But it really affected him. And he said, and this is what has always, I find it stunning. It's a high school kid who said, I made a decision kind of then and there that I would use my God-given talent to help everyone on the team be a better player. This is a reorientation for him, right? And it's actually what earned him this nickname of Magic. It was given to him by this, Michigan sports writer who said he's like Magic. He raises the level of play of every team that he plays on. What shifted in him?
Perspective.
Yeah, it's perspective. It's like, instead of showing up big, I need to play in a way that everyone can show up big. Now, I love this example. And here's why I share it again with you, because I think it illustrates two very important ideas. One is, this is what multiplier leadership looks like. It's not about playing small. A lot of people are like, oh, okay, for me to bring out the greatness in others, I'm going to be the cheerleader on the sidelines. I'm going to be encouraging my team. It's not how he played as an athlete. He played huge, but he played in a way that invited everyone else to play at their best. Can you play big? Being a multiplier is about using all of the intelligence and genius and capability around you, including your own. So it's can you show up and contribute in big ways, but do it in a way that leaves enough room for other people to contribute? So I think it illustrates what good multiplier leadership looks like. I think it illustrates how easy it is to end up the accidental diminisher. Doing what we've been taught to do, coached to do, celebrated for doing, doing what has led us to this point of success, and then not knowing how to temper that or redirect that. What we're going to do is we're going to go through some of the ways that we can end up becoming an accidental diminisher. I'm going to try to go through these fast because the important part is we're going to talk about this. So as I'm going through these 9, what I would invite you to do is to pick one that you think might be at play for you. If you're not sure what your accidental diminisher tendency is, you might think, well, if the people who worked on my team, the people I lead, or for some of you, the people in my family, were here in this room, what would they pick? Okay, each of these has two pictures. The picture on the left represents the leader's best intent. The picture on the right will represent the experience other people have. If you have been here with me on multipliers before, I would love to have you help me explain this. Okay, idea fountain, full of ideas. These are people, and this is like my biggest accidental diminisher tendency. In fact, I was just caught doing it yesterday in a meeting. Someone asked me the question, hey, what do you think we could do as like a final recap in this process? I'm like, oh, well, that's fun. We could do this. We could do this. Like, maybe you should try this. Have you thought about doing this? Why not do this? Like, we could do this as well. And these are people who just generate ideas naturally. Okay, what's the positive intent? We think that our ideas will help. Help do what? Inspire. Like, I'm going to toss out some ideas. We're going to get the creative juices going. And then other people will, they're going to jump in and they're going to have even better ideas. What happens when you work around a fountain of ideas? What's the experience like for other people? It's overwhelming, no direction. Yeah, people tend to get idea lazy around people who are idea rich. Yeah, at one point people used to come into my office to like give me progress on like what hey, we've run this, you know what, we found this, we're having like, and I'd be like, oh, that's so cool, that's great, have you thought about this? Maybe we should do this, what's next? And I would notice people would leave my office glazed over, like these kind of eyes. And so I had to write a sign on my door that just said in big block letters, ignore me as needed to get your job done. You know, like, so this is one I have to really manage, like, always on. Now we had someone here say like, this is something that you did. What does always on look like?
All day. 2 a.m. doing responding stuff at 2 a.m. and a lot of times always going.
Yeah, always going, bringing the energy, always contributing. It could be always working, but it tends to be like maybe always talking, always something to say, always something to contribute. And of course, we think that our energy would be contagious, right? What's it like to work around the always-on boss or colleague? Yeah, it's draining. You know, and what do we tend to do when we see these people coming toward us down the hallway, or you see their name pop up on your phone? What do you do? Yeah, like this. Okay, rescuer, big-hearted, loving kind of people. They love people. They want people to be successful. And when they see someone struggling, like 2 a.m., no ideas for the big pitch, what do? Yeah, they jump in and they help. What's it like to work for the rescuer? Yeah, it feels more like that. What about the pace setter? This is my son here. He brought some cards that we're going to use a little bit later. Thank you, Josh. And you should probably leave really fast before you start telling people what my accidental diminisher tendencies are. Okay, pace setter. Like, these are achievement-driven kinds of leaders, and they get out ahead of their team. They show people what good looks like. Hey, we want to be more customer-centric. I'm going to spend time in the field talking to customers, writing up reports about that. I'm going to show people what good looks like, and then what will people do? Follow. Yeah, that's the logic, right? What do people tend to do when the leader sets the pace like that, when they get out ahead of their team? Yeah, they tend to fall back and watch. That's my youngest son, Josh. He's 20 now, but like go back to when he's 7 years old. This kid loves to run. And every morning we would race to the bus stop. And he always wanted to race mom, right? Because racing mom, he would win most of the time. But every now and then I would forget that I was like the parent. And I would just compete, and I'd be like, okay, there's a last kid that I can run faster than, you know, he's 7, I can still beat him. My other kids run faster than me, and so I would like go racing out ahead. I would turn and look back, and what do you think Josh was doing? like sauntering. And what did he say when he got to the bus stop? I'm like, what's he doing? What's he say? And I think it's really important. Like it tells us a lot about what happens when the leaders like burst out ahead of their team. You're going too fast? You got to think like a 7-year-old kid. I wasn't even trying? Yeah, it's what he would say is like, yeah, we weren't racing that time, Mom. Right? People tend to fall back. We create spectators rather than followers. A little litmus test. If you've got some accidental diminisher tendencies, you know which dog represents you as the leader in this. You're like, I'm working so hard. Come on, let's play. Jump in. And people are like, I can't keep up with that. Rapid responder, quick to respond, quick to jump on problems, quick to answer a Slack, a text. They're quick because they're trying to build an agile team. What do we do around the rapid responder? What do you do when the email note is sent to you, but it's copied to that rapid responder boss or colleague? You kind of do this. And it looks more like this. You're like, you know what? They're probably already on it. They're probably typing now, and I'm still thinking. And so we just let them do it. They slow down organizations rather than speed them up. Optimist, positive, can-do leader. They see victory. And like this one I struggle with because this is very natural for me. I was born with too much of this can-do attitude. And it took me a while to figure out how diminishing it is. Because what do optimists miss? They miss reality, which kind of diminishes our credibility, but how does it diminish other people?
The struggle. Yeah.
They miss the struggle. Yeah, see, we don't see that behind the victory is this. The protector, who, it's like the rescuer has just moved upstream, right? Because they're keeping people out of problems and danger. Like the logic is, I'll handle the hard stuff. Like, I'll take care of this. And in some ways, I'll remove the obstacles for you. Like, I'll do the hard stuff to make it easier for you. Well, these leaders become like a banyan tree. They provide comfort. They provide shade. But what's the problem here? Yeah. It's like nothing grows under the banyan tree and nobody grows under these leaders. It creates huge bench strength problem inside of organizations. Yes, and like there are some things that we need to protect people from. But what happens if like the line gets crossed when we protect people from hard challenges? And sometimes we need to let people stand up for themselves. So I think there's a little balance there. Yeah, and it's when we take this orientation of like, and I got this. I was like trained in this logic. My first management job, my boss said, Liz, as a manager, your job is to do everything new, important, and hard. Let your team do the rest. Like, that sounds smart. So I did that. What do you think the result was? Yeah, they didn't get any smarter, and they didn't get any visibility. Like sometimes we have to go deal with these hard situations, and it's really a matter of picking like the right size wave, like knowing what will give people a little tumble versus crush them. But you're absolutely right. There are some things we should protect people from. Strategists, big, bold thinkers who do so much of the big thinking, everyone else is just sort of left working in a silo, assuming that the boss is going to kind of pull it all together. And lastly, the perfectionist, who loves to get it exactly right. But what's it like to work for the perfectionist? Never good enough. Can't get it right, everything gets done, redone. What do you end up learning to do? I people say, oh man, like he was so much a perfectionist, I just gave him incomplete work because I knew he was going to redo it anyway. And then that, of course, perpetuates a diminishing cycle. So my question is, what might be your accidental diminisher tendency? Yeah, that's a work experience for everyone else. What's your accidental diminisher tendency? There's a sheet there with a bunch of these. Find a sheet that looks like this. Would you circle what your accidental diminisher tendency is? Those are the headings on the column. And then if you use those yellow arrows, you can go in and identify some multiplier practices. I've mentioned several today that will help turn a would-be diminishing moment into a multiplier moment. And then what I want you to do is have a conversation. And instead of just picking to a partner, what I thought we would do is, maybe this is a little bit like group therapy, but what I want you to do is I want you to get amongst your ilk on this. People who struggle with the same things. So what I want you to do is get into groups of your accidental diminisher tendencies. We're going to take about 10 minutes to do this. So if you are an idea fountain, we're going to have you gather with other idea fountains. Now, what we'll do is we'll kind of organize the room. This way we're going to use this space. We can use space over here. Let's assume that upper right is here. You know, so this pace setter here, perfectionist back here, roughly gathered to that. What I need a few team captains here. So is there anyone here who's got the idea fountain thing going? Okay, in the back here, I'm going to give you this. And would you just gather in the appropriate space? And what we're going to do is have you lead a conversation where we're going to address, I'll put them up in a moment. What is it that you tend to do? Why is it diminishing? What tends to prompt it or trigger it? Like what's happening when you go into idea fountain mode? And what could you do instead? Okay, who's always on? Okay, back here, do you want to gather your people? I'm looking for a rescuer. Over here, pace setter. Okay, you know what, let me just, if we haven't called it, like rapid responder. Okay, pace setter, right there. Optimist, where are you? These are my people here. Okay, John, we had you calculate. We're gonna have over here, protector. Anyone for this? Okay, strategist and perfectionist. Okay, I'm right here on perfectionist and I'm coming at you with strategist. Would you gather? So if you are a leader, just wave your sign, gather together. I'm going to ask you to take 8 minutes to talk through these dynamics. Okay, hopefully that gave you a chance to explore an accidental diminisher tendency, what drives you there, why you tend to do it, how it might be diminishing, and what you might do instead. The reason why I want to have these conversations is to start a more important conversation. Because who should you really be having the conversation with? Yourself and your team. Your team. Now I want to give you a shortcut to leading like a multiplier. So here's the long path. The long path to becoming a leader who brings out greatness in others is to be aware of the difference of diminishing and multiplying leaders, understand those practices, know how you accidentally diminish, and being on constant vigil for your accidental diminisher tendencies. Oh, I know I'm an idea fountain. Let me watch for it. Oh, I think it's about to spout. Let me stop myself. And then, using these multiplier practices and getting good at them over time. And it absolutely works. I've seen people make huge transformations. Bill Campbell is one incredible, powerful example of this. But there's an easier way. Here's the easier way. It's a shortcut, and it works just as well. Is to be aware of your accidental diminisher tendencies and then to tell your team very openly, very bluntly, to say, oh yeah, I'm a rescuer. I want everyone to be successful. I know I jump in and I've got this kind of hero thing, but it's really because I want people to be successful. And to have it so out in the open on your team, everyone knows about it. Everyone talks about it. Everyone teases you about it. Because now they can do something about it. Because what happens if everyone on your team knows that you are a rescuer? They call you out. Like if you're about to jump in and extend a hand of help, even with the best of intentions, what do you have the right to say to me? Hey, bro, I got it. Hey, girl, I got it. I got this. Like I'm going to get it across the finish line. But you know what? Like you can celebrate that. Or like I'll let you know if I need a hand. If everyone knows I'm a massive idea fountain, what do they say to me? And people on my team say this all the time. I'm like, what about this? What about this? And like, Liz, do you want us to stop what we're doing and work on that? Or are you just having one of your idea parties? Oh, that was a total idea party. Ignore me is needed to get your job done. And what's better, one leader, self-aware, on constant vigil, or having 10 people who work for you watching for this. Like the math would tell you, talk about it so openly that people help you. Let your kids know what your tendencies are. Talk about it as a team. That was a warm-up for that conversation. In the last decade and a half, we've seen a pretty radical change in what we expect out of our leaders. Like no longer do we expect like this hand of greatness, one brain to figure things out for the organization. It's a table stake in many ways. I consider it sort of my life's work, is in many ways, this way of thinking and leading is a table stake to operate in many great organizations. Bill Campbell's got a few words on this. Can we get higher volume? Thank you.
The right and fun. I mean, if you have great ideas that emerge from the organization, your company just obviously is going to get better. I talk about it in terms of management practices because I do think that where it starts is in that executive room where you can, if the CEO can do it with the management team is going to feel that way, feel empowered. And they're going to be able to do the same thing with their staffs and it will cascade down to an organization. It's the way you get the best ideas.
Yeah, and I think the world has changed a lot, but this way of leading, I don't think it's enough. And I think the environment we need something more. We don't just need everyone else coming up with ideas. I think the reality is right now, leaders are leading in the dark. Like it takes more than what they know how to do. What we need from our teams are things beyond what other people know how to do. In many ways, we are navigating in the dark where we can't see where we're going. Maybe we don't know where we're going. What I want to do in our last 10 or 15 minutes together is to take a look at 3 practices that will help you lead in times of great uncertainty. In times where you feel like you are feeling around in the dark. I'm going to do this on 3 movies, 3 movie clips. And I'm going to start with this scenario is that right now, so many leaders are in a situation where it's like, I'm not even suppressing my ideas. Like, I can't even tell people what to do because the reality is, I just don't know. I just don't know. I want to go to one of my favorite scenes in one of my favorite movies. So, have you all seen Apollo 13? One of my favorite movies. What's the iconic scene from this movie? Houston, we have a problem? Yeah. So this is like when they have a problem. What's the scene that comes to mind for you in this movie?
They dump all the things on the table, so you gotta get this and this.
When they dump the things on the table. Yeah, I think it's one of like this great moments in movies. I think it's a great moment in leadership. Okay, so wait, let me back up. For those who haven't seen the movie or forgotten this movie, they are trying to, it's a NASA mission. They're trying to send a manned capsule up to the moon. This is like, I guess, 2 missions after the first lunar landing. 3 astronauts, and it looks like a lunar landing is not possible. Some things have gone wrong. Now they're just trying to return those 3 astronauts back to Earth safely. And the LIM module that they're now in, they're not supposed to be in that. It's filling up with poisonous gas. Here you go. And we might need a big volume on this.
We have a situation brewing with carbon dioxide.
We had a CO2 filter problem on the LIM module.
5 filters on the limb.
Which were meant for 2 guys for a day and a half. So I told the doctor,
They're already up to 8 on the gauges. Anything over 15 would get impaired judgment, blackouts, the beginnings of brain asphyxia.
What about the scrubbers on the command module?
we take square cartridges.
The ones on the limb are round.
Tell me this isn't a government operation.
It's just isn't a contingency we remotely looked at.
Those CO2 levels are going to be getting toxic.
Well, I suggest you gentlemen invent a way to put a square peg in a round hole. Rapidly.
Okay, people, listen up. People upstairs, handed us this one, and we gotta come through. We gotta find a way to make this fit into the hole for this, using nothing but that. Let's give it organized.
Okay, let's build a filter.
Okay, I think it's emblematic of what great leadership looks like because he doesn't have an answer. No one has an answer. This is actually not their problem, is it? What does he do so brilliantly in this moment? There's about 5 or 6 things. He defines the problem, and then what? He doesn't solve it. Do you notice in there, he didn't share any ideas? Maybe because he doesn't have any. Or maybe because there's no time for the team to follow one of his harebrained ideas. What does he do? He defines a problem. What else did he do? He finds the resources. And what he says is, we got to make this fit into the hole for this with nothing but this. What does he take off the table? All grumbling about, well, we could solve it if we had a wrench. Like, oh, I have a perfect solution. It requires duct tape. We don't have duct tape. What else does he do? So he gives them the boundaries. Like, these are the resources we're working with. I wish they were more, but this is what we got. What else does he do? We got to come through. Like, this is a moment that matters. What else does he do? He puts the onus, like, we need everyone. Like, okay, make some coffee. Let's start building a filter. Like, we need every brain on this. What else does he do? He's in the room with them. He stays with them, but doesn't solve the problem. What else does he do? There's another important thing he does. Hey, the guys upstairs have handed us this one. Like, he acknowledges, like, we didn't create this problem, but guess who gets to help solve it? And he takes a lot of that grumbling off the table. He creates that focus in these moments where we don't know. Like, the leader's job is not to have the answers, it's to ask the right questions. We're going to do a quick exercise as we start to, oh yeah, we don't have time for that one. We're going to get to this exercise in just a minute because our time is short. Okay, second scenario that I think we find ourselves in more and more when we are leading in the dark where we don't have answers, we don't have visibility, is we find ourselves in these situations, I call them gotta go. And there tends to be a movie scene behind this one. Like, you know the scene, a lot of movies have this, they're kind of apocalyptic, where something really, really bad has happened. And it might be a scene, you know, like, it might be like The Rock tends to be in this movie, like San Andreas. Remember this movie? You find it in other kinds of movies, but it's the sense of like something bad has happened and we have to move out. We have to evacuate. We gotta go, and we gotta go fast with what we've got. I always think of these scenarios like the parent who like wakes their child up in the middle of the night. You know, we find these in scenes like this. You know, in the movies like this, we find it in like movies like Quiet, where like something really bad has happened. And it's like parents who wake their children up at 2 a.m. and say, we gotta go. And the kids are like, what do you mean we gotta go? Like, you know what, it's not safe here. And they scoop up their kids and they're like, we gotta go. And their kids would say, well, Daddy, where are we going? And what's the answer? I don't know. I don't know where we need to go, but we can't stay here. See, I think those scenes in these movies reflect where so many managers are right now, which is, this isn't about, I see a better place, take the hand of greatness, and I'll get you there. It's like, I don't know where we're going. I don't know what's happening with generative AI. I don't know what kind of tectonic shifts we're gonna see. Like, I don't know, but what I know is we gotta move on. We can't keep doing what we're doing today. And I want you to think of that scene where like the parent is grabbing that little child and the child's like, okay, Daddy, I'll go with you. What's required in those moments for people to say, I will go with you knowing you don't know where you're going? Trust. I think one of the things that we can do to build trust in these moments is to have very clear delineation in these evacuation kind of moments, which is here's what we know and here's what we don't know. You know, in these moments where we're sort of evacuating, moving on, it's easy to pretend. It's easy to pretend like you know when you don't, which destroys trust. It's also easy to just say, I don't know, we don't know. Here's what I want you to do. as we're wrapping up, would you take one of the challenges where you are leading someone and you don't exactly know where the next move is? You don't know where the final destination of a project, a product, an initiative. And would you just make a quick list? There's a piece of paper in there. And just, what is it that we don't know? And what is it that we do know? See, the two ineffective ways to lead in these is like, I don't know where we're going. Destroys trust. The other ineffective ways is like, hey, I got this figured out. And in reality, you don't know. But what builds trust is we say, okay, here are the things that we don't know. But here are the things that we do know, and we're going to build on that. Would you make a quick list? When you're facing this challenge with your team, what are the knowns and what are the unknowns? Take a minute. Will you take a challenge that's fraught with ambiguity, where you don't know the destination, and will you make a list of things that you know and things that you don't know that you have to figure out as a team?
Is this with a specific problem?
Yeah, with a specific challenge. And while you're doing that, let me share one of these moments I experienced at Oracle where our strategy was in total disarray and the executives couldn't quite see it. We're getting feedback from all our managers around the world. We're not clear on the strategy. We're not clear on the strategy. I'm working with Oracle's 3 top executives, and I'm trying to give them this feedback to help them understand that the strategy is not clear enough to help us navigate this new wave of technology. And I'm kind of beating them up about it. This is the president, the chief financial officer, the chief technology officer of the company. And finally, the CFO, who was my boss, Jeff Henley, he just blurts out, he's like, Liz, you could stop beating us up over this. And he says, we get that there's a problem. He says, we understand that the strategy is not clear. And he said, but we don't know how to do this. We've never done this before. And I'm thinking they've never communicated the strategy. And then he goes on to say, hey, you know what? We're now leading a $30 billion company, and we've never led an organization this big and this complex. And he turns to the president, and he's like, hey, Ray, you ever led a $30 billion company that operated in 120 countries? And Ray's like, I've never done this before. And the chief of officer is like, I'm out. Like, I've never done this. And he says, we don't know how to do this. And I realized he's saying, we don't know how to architect a strategy that complex. And then he said, hey, Liz, if you could help us figure this out, now that would be useful. And I'm like, great. And it started when he said, we don't know how to do this. I'm like, okay, great. What is it that we don't know? We brought someone in. We built a strategy around a set of things we know and a whole bunch of questions that we don't know that our executives didn't have answers to. And then what did we do? We brought managers in from around the world, senior leaders, and we said, here's a bunch of questions. Help us fill this in, and we built this collective strategy. It started when one executive was brave enough to say, I don't have the answers. I don't know how to do this. And then started asking the questions. It's one of the most powerful things you can do is admit what you don't know, but also clarify what you do know, and then let your team help figure that out. You've established the learning agenda. Now, we probably don't have time in here to fully complete this list, but I would encourage you to take something that's challenging. What is it that we know? What is it that we don't know? And define a learning agenda for your team. Okay, let me go to this last scenario. These are scenarios where you just can't see. You're working in the dark. And the movie scenes I always think of are like military special ops. Like, what are the movies that come to mind for you? Zero Dark 30. Absolutely. What are the other movies? Saving Private Ryan. You know, these movies all involve like a special ops where there's a mission. There's some sort of target. Maybe they're trying to evacuate someone. Maybe they've got a different kind of a target. But a team is going in under the cover of darkness. They tend to be movies like this. I think that's like Acts of Valor. What do we got? Zero Dark 30. Can't remember that one.
Get that. Could you try it?
And a team is going in under cover of darkness. And you know how these movies play out? No one person can see everything. And the team sort of disperses. And what is the role of the commander on these teams? It's not to give orders. The commander's intent, the mission has been established. Once a team is dispersed and you've got these people over here and these people have moved here and these people over here, what is the role of the leader? Is to get people talking. And how do these scenes go? They've usually got radio communication and someone's like, okay, I got eyes on here. We entered here. Whoops, west door is closed. We're gonna have to move through the east. Okay, we've got boots on the ground. I've got visibility on this target. And they succeed because the leader doesn't tell people what to do, doesn't find the answer, doesn't necessarily go in himself. He gets people talking. Their job is to facilitate this kind of communication, is to get people talking. Now, here's what I want to do as we wrap up, is I think the role of the leader right now is to be clear about what we know and what we don't know. It's to get people talking. It's to ask the right questions. Now, in my ideal world, leaders spend time thinking about what are the questions I need to ask. They ask the questions that get people thinking, that get people communicating, that get people piecing together what's going on. Okay, I see this happening, we're finding this, and building that intel so they can collectively solve problems. The leader's job is to ask the best questions. I also realize that most people are really busy and don't have time for questions. One of the practices I think can really be game-changing here is to have a set of what I call a back pocket questions. Back pocket questions are a set of go-to questions you can use in urgent moments. What are some of your favorite questions that get people thinking, talking? I would love to have you shout out a few. Why is this going on? Great. And here's where we're going with this. We're about to wrap up. Here's what I want to do in our last few minutes is I would like for everyone here to walk out with 5 great questions that you can have in your back pocket that you can kind of pull out and use when you get into moments of crisis or when teams are stuck or when people can't see and it feels dark and confusing. Like these become your go-to questions. Okay, great questions. We've got what can we control? It's a brilliant question and focusing team on here's what we control.
When will it affect us?
When will this affect us?
What is the intention?
What is the intent? What do we know? What do we not know?
What are the risks?
What are the risks? Okay, I'm hoping you're listening and stealing questions. What can we do right now?
What did we learn?
What did we learn from this? What are our limits? Has this ever happened before? Is there someone here who knows how to solve it? I remember an ER doc here at Stanford led this team through this crisis situation where they didn't have an answer. And his best question was, okay, if all these things don't work, who here in the hospital right now could find an answer to this? And they're like, we know the cardiac fellow that we need to go to in the back.
Can I give you 5 real quick?
5, give it to him.
What's the best possible outcome? First question. Second, how do we accomplish that? Third, what's the worst outcome? Fourth, how do we avoid that? Fifth, what do we need for those things?
Okay, those are great questions. I want you, and if I could ask you to do something as a result of our time together, is to create a set of back pocket questions for you. Maybe you write down some of your favorites. Maybe you ask some friends, what are your best questions? Maybe you take some of these. I want you to steal some of mine. I've got a few questions here. Oh, okay, we're skipping all this. And here we go. Here are some of my favorite questions. Where might the data be misleading us? What has to be true for success to happen? What do you think? Down at the bottom, what do you need to move forward? Are there any reasons we shouldn't proceed? Are there any concerns you have? Where might we be wrong? What am I not hearing that I need to hear right now? My son Josh brought these down. These are a set of these questions on cards. If you want, come take it. And the idea isn't to have to use all of them. It's to just pull 2 or 3 that have efficacy for you, fill in some others, cross them out, and make your own set of 5 or 6 powerful questions that you can use to lead people in times of ambiguity and uncertainty. What we know is right now, the best leaders do not have the answers. They have the right questions. They get people thinking. They clarify what's in our control, what's out of our control. What do we know? What do we don't know? How do we move forward when we can't see what's happening around us? As we wrap up here, I want to acknowledge that it's hard leading when it's dark. But like Paul Gauguin said, the French artist, like, I shut my eyes in order to see. That actually, in some ways, not having answers is an advantage as a leader. Because what happens when you can't see the solution? You have to rely on your people. What if you don't know where you're going? Then it requires the intelligence of everyone in your operation to piece it together and figure it out. In some ways, it's an advantage. Maybe we realize that our power as leaders doesn't come from knowing, it comes from not knowing. And it comes from not necessarily being the genius on the team, it comes from being a genius maker. My hope in our time together is that there's one thing that you might do that is an act of great leadership, but it's not this kind of great leadership. It's an act of great leadership that inspires great teams and great thinking and teams that can navigate brilliantly even when they can't see everything that's going on. With that, we are very much out of time. And Mark, back to you. Thank you.